And my little pinky toe was in the door, and I just kicked that door down with all the passion that I could muster. You know, as soon as I was in there, I was ravenously sweeping the floors and asking every single person every question, getting everyone's name, learning what was going on. And that was it. I was in the film industry from a crappy call center, from the most loathed job I could possibly imagine, and I got in.
Welcome back. This is the Pencil Kings podcast. If I'm talking quickly today, it's because I am excited because I get to play the fanboy today. I feel that when you've been working on films or games or comic books, whatever it is that you love, all of a sudden kind of the mystery of the whole thing gets taken away. However, there are projects that come along once in a while that really inspire you, that you read them or you watch them or you consume them in one way or another. And then you're just left wanting more. You want to know more about how it was made, who made it. And so today I have that opportunity. So however I normally do these, whatever your take on it is, today I'm just being a total geek nerd fanboy. So if you don't like that, I'm sorry for it. We'll be back to the normal digging into the details and the nitty gritty next time. But I'm just really excited to welcome Dane Hallet to the call. And before we start off, we'll have show notes for this at pencilkings.com/Dane Hallet. That's DANE-HALLETT. Two
That's
T's
right.
at the end.
Yep.
All right, Dane, welcome to the call. How are you doing today?
Hi, Mitch. I'm going well. Good, thank you.
All right, now, when we were talking before we hit record here,
Yep.
You're telling me that you're kind of a rare blend of a bunch of different things. So why don't you tell people just very quickly what some of those different things are so that they can get, like a 1-minute sense of some of the things that you do, and then we'll dive more into your story and the film that I'm so excited to talk to you about.
Sure. Yeah, look, I started in the industry, I guess I was in my early 20s. I started in the prop making world. I love doing that kind of stuff. I'd always loved doing it since I was a kid, but I've always been a good illustrator as well. So I naturally moved on from prop making to illustration. But these days I find myself just hopping between the two. I also dabble in special effects as well, where I, sort of muck around with breakaway effects, which I don't know if people don't know what that is. It's like when in a movie, like when someone gets hit in the head with like a timber block, it's got to be soft and nice for the actors to react to. So I do that kind of stuff as well. And yeah.
So wait a second, you're telling me that when Wolverine gets hit in the head with a giant piece of wood, it's not real wood?
Yeah, that's right, man. That's it. Yeah, I've been lucky enough to work on both of the Wolverine movies, actually. The first one I did prop making for them. And then the second one, I was making props, but I was also making molds as well, which is where you do, someone has a sculpture or say it's the claws, for example, you have to replicate like 50 of them. So you have to do that. So, that was pretty awesome as well.
So just a quick question before we dive into this. The breakaway props that you have, are they really light? Like I feel like in the movie you can never really tell it. The actors do a very good job of making things have weight and it's very believable, but what do they feel like when you pick up like a giant piece of wood that somebody's going to get smashed with? It
is ultra light. Yeah, it really does depend on what the scene calls for. But you know what I've found? That a lot of the time sound does half the job for you. Like, so, if it's like a huge piece of metal, supposedly, that's hitting the ground, but it's really just a soft piece of foam, sound just makes it sound like it's this big weighted piece of metal. So,
Gotcha. That's really cool. All right, so the movie that I'm so excited to talk about is Mad Max Fury Road. I can't remember if I talked about it on the podcast before, but I walked out of the film and I went with my girlfriend and I said, wow, that is easily in my top 5 films that I've ever seen. And you're free to disagree with me, listener. However, let me justify this. I really enjoy movies where I feel extremely stimulated visually. And I feel that Mad Max Fury Road was one of those films where it really pulled me into the universe, and there were so many little details. I have to watch it again because I'm sure I missed a ton of these details. But there was a point in the film where I was watching it, and there's no spoiler here or anything, but it was a shot inside of a car, and I believe it was like a Volkswagen Bug that had been redone and modified. And they had this embossed foil roof with skulls on it. And I was just like, wow, somebody thought of that. Like they could have had a normal roof, or they could have just taken out whatever the normal roof is and made it look all dingy. But no, they actually had the thought to put this amount of little detail. And it's these small details that I, as a fan of art and as an artist, that I really appreciate. And so yeah, my girlfriend's like, are you crazy? How could this be in your top 5? There was no story. And it's not always about the story. Sometimes it's just about how beautiful something is. And Mad Max is one of those movies that I thought was extremely beautiful, and that's why it's in my top 5. And when I heard that Dane had worked on it, then I was really excited to get him onto the podcast. So Dane, just to start, could you tell us a little bit about what things you were doing on the film? There's always so much that goes into these, but what were you actually touching?
At the very beginning, so this is a really long production. I mean, it started back in 2003, which I wasn't affiliated with, but it sort of began and then stopped and then began again and stopped again. And in 2009, the end of 2009 is when it started for this most serious time. And I started doing dressing the motorbikes at first. We're just doing cosmetics. Basically, we got in these Yamaha motorbikes, pre-existing sort of factory a standard kind of motorbike, and we would strip all the fairings off and then just go to town making them look like they were from the post-apocalypse, And then I sort of moved on from that to doing some pretty serious props, which I get some pretty cool screen time. Some of the stuff that I've made is pretty get some pretty prominent screen real estate, actually, but yeah.
It's always nice when you work on something, because I feel like often you're working on this thing. It might take you like a whole week you're working on, or maybe even longer. And then once you see it in the final film, you're like, hey, there's my thing way off in the distance. It's like 10 pixels tall. Wow, I spent a lot of time on that.
That's right, with like 0.3 seconds of footage as well.
Yeah. So that's really cool. And just to explain to people a little bit, I'm really curious about when you say the fairings. I know what this is, but to people listening that maybe aren't familiar with motorcycles, what are the fairings? So you took those off, and then how did you detail them? Is it just taking a brush and starting to go to things? Or are you using all kinds of crazy tools? Or what does it really look like?
Well, we'll just abandon all of the... Okay, so the fairings is like the dressing on a motorbike. Like, for example, if you have if you've got some kind of a BMW and there's like these plastic kind of or fiberglass pieces that sort of hang around the back or act as a mud flap or something with some BMW signage on it, that's the fairing. So we'd strip all of that stuff away and abandon them, and then effectively what the production designer did, which, by the way, Mitch, I have to preface, the whole production, there's just so many great and talented people involved in it that I will have to sort of name drop as we go along. But Colin Gibson, he was the production designer. This is why Mad Max was so cool, and I just have to say that I think you can see it on the screen as well, is because as opposed to a lot of huge sort of big studio productions where everything is sort of pixel managed, or everyone has this huge controlling arm as to what something's going to look like, Colin would just trust, or we were hired as artists, and that he trusted the vision anyway, and he said, go nuts, do something that looks totally sick and that you love, and it has to be recycled. It has to have more than one use. It has to make total sense. It can't defy gravity. It can't just be cool for the sake of cool. So what he would then do is buy a whole auction of like a factory that was going out of business. He would buy all of the leftover machinery. So, like, one of them was a piggery with all of these sort of abattoir weaponry and all this kind of stuff. Some of them were deceased estates, and he'd just buy a whole ton of it, like a container, bring it into the workshop, have it shipped over, open the doors, and say, make cool shit. And that's what would stick on the motorbikes.
That's awesome. And I guess like it's one thing to, I feel like there's two parts to this. One is the make it cool part, which can sometimes almost be like a curse when an art director, somebody says, it's okay, but make it cool. And you're like, what do you mean make it cool? Give me some direction. That's your job. But then I feel like there's the other part of actually being able to fabricate and work with this stuff. And Can you tell us a little bit? Because I think for the people listening, we've had enough guests interviewed that we understand a bit about the make it cool part.
Sure.
However, we've never really touched on the fabrication part. And where does that background come? Like, were you a machinist or I don't even know what the job title would be before. Is it something that you just picked up along the way? So
Yeah.
if somebody's interested in making props or eventually getting to this level, where might they start or where might they look for inspiration or things that they could actually do?
Well, I think my first sort of, I guess, credential would be that I'm an awesome bullshit artist. I think that works for a lot of other artists as well. Um, but what happens is uh, I think because I was always passionate about movies anyway, I would always, as a younger guy, play with plastic model kits or collect figurines and muck around with them, reassemble them and stuff. And it all sort of started there, and I began to learn some tricks and whatever. But by the time we got to Mad Max, it was all metal. Colin, like one of the stipulations was that we weren't going to fabricate anything. Like, so there was going to, and I don't mean fabricate in the steel term. I mean, on films, what you usually do is just say if it's an anvil, for example, that is part of the dressing, we would mold that. So we'd make a silicon mold of it and then replicate it in something softer. But on Max, the stipulation was, nope, it's going to be real. It's got the natural aged look. We want to keep all that in there. So we had to sort of get our head around steelwork, and which, I'd done a tiny bit before. Like when I was out of high school, I did a little bit as like a laborer on a building site, and my father was a bricklayer, so I'd been around trades, sort of my whole life. But it really didn't compare to what I needed to know on Max. And by the time we started, we basically just picked up the tools and threw ourselves into it. And by the time we're finished, we could just weld anything and put anything together. And even motorbikes, like I've liked riding motorbikes, but I'd never taken them apart before. But, on Max, we had to take heaps of things apart and put it back together. So we just learned. And I guess it was throwing yourself into it, and that's how we sort of got around it.
I love that. And that actually brings back memories of, you're just presented with an art problem and you may have no clue at the beginning how to do it, but
Yes.
you just like say, okay, well, how do I break this down? What's the first step? Or who's done this before? What's an example in a movie that maybe I could look at something that's already existing? Okay, cool. So I see how, maybe there's a movie where they had to do a lot of metal work, and then you read some magazine article and you're like, okay, well, all these were welded, but they used this special type of welding. And then you're like, okay, cool, let's try this.
Yeah.
It doesn't work. And then you try something else, and it just keeps going like that.
Yeah, that's right. And one of the most exciting things is, like, of course, you're learning on the job. I mean, nothing beats that experience. But then when you're in knee deep in that, and, and the boss says, Dane, this is going to get some serious screen time. You better do a good job of it. And you're like, okay, I better make sure I'm good at this. So, you'd ask the right people. I mean, there's a million guys that had worked on the movie that had like 20 years experience over me. And I would just come, basically be learning at their feet, the tricks of the trade. And then, of course, when you're learning it under pressure, at least for me, it just becomes a part of your technique after that. It just becomes something that's ingrained in you. So it's always apparent in your work after that,
Mm-hmm. Definitely. And did they bring in specialists? So when you guys were like day 2 of production, like, okay, these guys don't know jack about welding. We need to bring in a specialist for like a workshop for one day, because otherwise somebody's going to get hurt and the stuff is just not going to hold together once it's put to the test.
Well, okay, there's a couple of stories affiliated with that, but I will just start off by saying the steel department, for example, the guys who are doing so say, for example, the huge truck in it, the war rig, the black one,
yeah,
right? That war rig they bought a truck from Czechoslovakia called a Tatra, and then they stripped all of whatever makes it recognizable as that kind of a truck. I think it's a military truck of some sort. And the steel guys built that whole truck. Everything they fabricated steel wise, except for the VW bodies at the back they're sort of at the at the very far end of the I guess it's like it's the milk tanker, really, I guess. But at the
Mhm.
very top end, at the rear of that, is where that they were real V dubs. But everything else they'd manufactured. These guys work on movies. These guys are qualified sort of tradies that they spend their time doing the steel work on films. And so they were already there. There was lots of professionals around. I mean, I'm relatively young, I guess, compared to a lot of the guys, a lot of the veterans in the film industry. And so when you're talking about inside the war rig, that it's got that awesome pressed steel that's got the little skulls in it, the little Morton skulls. That was done
Mhm.
by a guy named Mark Natoli, who is an incredible panel beater, an old school panel beater, and he can just roll steel to look like anything. And so, these guys were already there, and we were just, picking their brains, learning, mutating their techniques, and trying to do our own thing. But I will tell a really funny story if we have the time, Mitch. I don't know. You can stop me if you feel like I'm a
Yeah, yeah,
rambler.
definitely. No, I love it.
But what happened was on Max, George got this idea and he said he found these magazines called Device, right? And in Device magazine, there's a lot of industrial artists. And so he got these guys in from Germany, all over the world. There was one guy I remember from, I think it was LA, I guess it was. But anyways, he got these artists in to do these amazing pieces. And what they did contribute was brilliant. But I think because they were artists and they were very specialized, they had their own techniques and all their work is absolutely beautiful. But they're used to running on their own schedule. A film schedule is manic. It's absolutely manic, whereas these guys have got their own workshops with their own tools and all these things set up. And they had these guys in there and they were charged with doing a lot of the hero props. The arm, for example, Charlize's arm, all the steering wheels were supposed to look absolutely gorgeous. And what happened was the production designer didn't necessarily think that was the way to go. And he thought, listen, let's just get the guys that are here, which are talented enough to make this stuff. Let's just get them to do heaps of cool stuff as well, and we'll see who sort of wins out in the end. And look, I know you've seen the film, and I'm trying to avoid spoiling here, but the war rig steering wheel, the second one, the one that Max has to retrieve. If you know what I'm talking about, Mitch, does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay, so that was my steering wheel, and so that was the wheel that effectively sort of meant that the artists had to go home because Colin, I said to him, I was really nervous. He goes, listen, Dane, this is a very serious piece. It's going to get a lot of screen time. You better make sure that it's really good. And I was like, I said, Colin, what if it's bad? And he goes, just do a good one. And I said, okay, man, okay, no worries. So I did it. George absolutely loved it. In fact, when he's walking around, examining all the things that he made, he'd just come pick it up off the bench and carry it with him. And I believe it's in his house right now, the real one. And anyways, that meant that the artists sort of were no longer needed. So those, they are specialists in their field, but those specialists sort of went home because we could handle it. So, yeah, I guess they did get specialists in many ways. There's a lot of, sort of veterans hanging around, but then they got these guys in thinking that they'd be the best, the remedy, the language of the film, and it ended up not really gelling. So.
Yeah, I think I also have several examples from my own history working in film and games of this happening.
Yep.
That sometimes it's just who can get it done the fastest, and then often it doesn't. There's usually some small tweaks that happen,
Yeah.
but it's getting it to that like 80% point that's actually really, well, I guess there's two parts of difficulty, but just getting it done really quickly so you can show somebody and they say like, oh, awesome. Okay. What about this? And you're like, okay, cool. And then you go back and you make those tweaks and you come back and you show it. And the faster you can iterate and do that,
Yep.
the better off. And I think, again, for people listening, I like to have some actionable things. And
Yep.
This has been a recurring theme of just make more awesome things happen faster.
Yes.
Whatever that means to you.
Yeah.
Like, and another thing was pick up the pace. Like if you're at home listening while you're drawing, once this interview is finished, set your timer for 30 minutes and see how much you can get done. Because while you're listening and drawing at the same time, you're kind of engaging two different parts of your brain.
Yeah.
You're drawing. But set a timer for 30 minutes and see how much you can actually get done. Because in these professional environments, if this is what you're aspiring, if this is where you want to go, you need to get a lot of stuff done. And if you don't, it's going to be apparent very quickly and you're probably not going to be around for that long. However, if you do get a lot of stuff done, you're pretty much guaranteeing your job security, I
Yeah.
think, because they always want people who can finish things really quickly.
Yeah, yeah, and sometimes it comes down to like for Max, I felt that it was our background that just secured us as being like it was almost it was just we were just trusted, you know. Like I remember there was heaps of stuff that would just come up, pop up in the script every day, like oh, Furiosa needs a water bottle. Oh, okay, no worries, I'll just make one, and so I'll just do one, and they're like, that's it, that's great, done, excellent, walk away, and it was just about I guess it's just that was the language. We were in the groove, and it didn't really matter after that. Anything we did was kind of it was just flowed with the movie, so we did it.
All right, so the next question that I have is I'm curious about what it was like to work on this production. So I'll tell you what the image that I have in my mind from what I've heard so far. So they're in a big warehouse. There's
Yeah.
these cargo containers either inside or outside, but there's somewhere
Yep.
that's handy and there's just a bunch of stuff. And there's mechanical parts everywhere and it's kind of chaotic, but then there's also people have their dedicated areas where like this is your area and this is the thing that you're working
Yep.
on. And it's very bare bones and sparse, but there's so much creative energy that's flowing through there because all this stuff has never been seen before, never been created before, and you're
Yep.
just it's not quite like assembling Legos, but sort of, because the pieces are existing, but you got to figure out how they fit together in an interesting and unique way, and then
Yeah.
making sure that as you piece these things together, they all look good together as a cohesive whole. And
Yep.
you've got catered food. Did you have catered food?
Well, first of all, an amazingly accurate description of exactly the workshop. That's brilliant. It's like you were there. But no, we didn't actually. I mean, we have catering whenever we're filming, but when you're not filming, you have craft services. So you got like a lunchroom that's full of cold meats and
Gotcha.
bread and milk and whatever. So yeah, but that was like sort of an outside shed. We actually had. I mean, if you consider the movie only came out, was it this year, 2015? It was, wasn't it?
Yep. I think in
So
May or so.
yep. So if you consider, I was there in the end of 2009. I mean, and we only finished filming, I believe, at the end of 2013. I was fortunate enough to, when there was quiet time, I'd jump off and do another film and come back. But we had quite a few different workshops. We had one set up sort of in the suburbs, the western suburbs of Sydney, and then we moved to the outback of Australia in Broken Hill. And then a lot of the crew, basically, a majority of the film was shot in Namibia, Africa. And then they came back and then it again shot in the western suburbs of Sydney. So there was a lot of different workshops, but each time the DNA was exactly like that. But then, of course, when we were filming, yep, we had lunch tents with some awesome catering food. So
yeah, the reason why I asked was it just feels like that's a time that I always remember like getting together with people over the catered food, and you didn't know it was going to be there that day. And I can't remember any of the conversations, but I do definitely remember, like having In-N-Out Burger or whatever come in LA and everybody gathering around and it being a big event. And
that's
you wanted to go early, otherwise you might only get one round if you're really hungry that day or whatever. But
yeah.
So that's really cool. And so you wrapped or you were done all of the prop work in 2009. Did I hear that correct?
No, so we started in 2009 and we finished in 2013. The end of 2013.
Okay.
Yep.
I was just thinking like, wow, if they finished in 2009, that's a long time to wait to see the fruits of your labor. But even in 2013, it's still, 2 years. And for me, I've always been on the post-production end, which if you're listening, you don't know what that is. It's the sort of the digital effects and making sure that the colors all look right. But that happens at the end, and you're pretty much running right against the deadline of when the film goes to be printed from computer onto actual film. I don't even know if they still do that. That was like 10 years ago I was doing this stuff, so I'm a dinosaur.
Same.
So I guess now I'm going to take my fanboy hat off for a little bit.
Yep.
And I want to ask, I feel that one of the things that that aspiring artists don't realize is how many jobs there are for art and for creative people. You know, these are not jobs that are often taught in schools. There are
Yes.
some specialized schools, of course, that go into this, but
Yep.
then, you know, you have to relocate and pay crazy costs, and
Yeah.
or there's things that you can learn from people in your community, but maybe you don't have somebody that's doing you know, kit bashing or
Yeah.
metalwork or props or anything like this. And so the difficult thing, I think, is for people to realize that this time that you spend sketching, this time that you spend in Photoshop, it can actually go to things that are much bigger and not
Oh
sketching
yeah.
or not Photoshop related at all.
Yep.
But if you give up and you think, oh man, you know, I'm not the best artist, so what? There's no hope for me. I'm not good. It's like, no, there totally is hope. There's like
Oh
a
man.
job for somebody that's just amazing at painting rust on things. I
Yes.
guarantee there's probably like 10 or, you know, more than 10 people that specialize in specific things just like this.
Yep.
But how would you recommend somebody realize this stuff or go about? Because it's like once you're in the industry, you could
Yes.
be, maybe you get hired as a concept artist, so you're doing your concept stuff and you're like, I'm, you know, kind of bored, but I seem to spend a lot of time in the prop room and those guys are having way more fun than the
Yeah.
concept art team is. I'm gonna start doing some of this stuff on the weekend, and because I know the main prop guy, he loves doing this. He's actually invited me to his house to work on this stuff.
Yep.
But before you're in, you don't have any chance to do this.
Yeah.
Like,
Um,
and I don't even know how you would stand out, or I guess I have ideas, but I'm curious what you think about this.
well, Mitch, look, again, stop me if I ramble, right? But I have, well, my whole story of getting into the industry is pretty funny. First of all, I have to say enthusiasm goes a long way. And I think there's a lot of people that are way better at illustrating or even prop making or anything that I do. There's people that are way better at it. But I love my job, and it shows. And people like to be surrounded by people like that. People really, employers, they want to feel like they've offered a job to someone who genuinely appreciates it. And, you know, when I first started, I was only too happy to clean the toilets. You know, I didn't care. And even to date, I am just so, I love being around movies and working on movies. I don't care. You know, I do a lot of concept art these days. I could be sitting at a desk and someone's moving a table around outside. I'll just go outside and help them because I just like it. I like being around there and, like, you know, being enthusiastic. It's just, I don't know, it gets you quite far. But in terms of getting into the industry, I mean, I was working in a call center, which I loathe. And I think the rest of humanity does and should as well. Working in a call center feels like the lowest end. But I dropped out of movie school, as it were. I went to a government-run education sort of deal over here, and all I cared about was movies. But the course consisted of several different things. There was events and entertainment. There was, you know, heaps of different stuff, graphics and blah, blah, blah. And all I would do was hang out with the prop making teacher and the movie studio. And that's all I did. And so, of course, I failed, you know, but I learned what I needed to learn because I loved it. I was getting every bit of information. And sure enough, you know, they just sort of said, well, you know, you're not doing anything. You can't just keep doing this. So we'll see you later. But and I thought, oh, that's it. That's the end of my dream. I didn't really care though, because I just love drawing. I love doing other stuff. I kept it up, and I got a job at a call center. And I hated computers at the time. I didn't know how to use them. Of course, I use them every day now. So I learned some pretty invaluable skills at the call center. But I went into the call center and I said, oh, look, I'll give myself 2 weeks. You know, I lasted 9 months. Now, in the call center, there's a prerequisite that you have to keep your calls underneath a minute or something like that. I never used to do that because I hated taking phone calls. So if I got someone that was really nice, I'd stretch out the conversation. I'd say, hey, you having a nice day? You're doing this or whatever, you know, and I never hit the KPIs. And it so worked in my favor because one day I walked in, it was 9 months later, I'd had enough, and I was like, that's it, I've got to get out. I'm just going to go find another job, you know, I'll just go work somewhere near a beach or something cool, you know, I don't care, I've had enough. And I said to the guys in the office, I said, listen, I've found my dream job, I'm going to leave. You know, of course I didn't find my dream job, I just wanted to leave. And they said, you can't, you have to give 2 weeks notice. I said, well, you know, dock me, I don't care, I'm out today. And they go, well, listen, you know, we can't stand in the ways of your dreams, like, you know, go for it. And I was like, thank you very much. And what had happened was, at the end of the day, there was a phone call sitting there on a corporate line, which I never used to take. I managed the I don't know if you have it all around the world, but our toll roads here in Australia, they're run with an e-tag system, with like a little digital device you put in the car and you drive through, and it registers how much you have to pay, or whatever. It's directly linked to your credit card. That makes sense, right, Mitch?
Yep.
Yep. So I used to manage those things. Anyways, one day I got a call for the first Wolverine film. Some guys just said it was on the commercial line, and I took it. And of course, my usual persona of dragging out the conversation, I learned that he was working on Wolverine. I learned that it was a film studio that needed these e-tags, and it was highly illegal to do so. But I said, oh, listen, I'm trained in these arts. I've done special effects, I've done prosthetic effects. Who can I call about doing some work experience? And the guy goes, oh, look, I don't know, man. Try this number. He gave me a special effects number, and he gave me a coordinating number. I immediately after that call had finished, I hung up the phone. I said, thanks very much. I logged into personal time, because in a call center, they manage how long you're in the toilet for and blah, blah, blah. It's an absolute nightmare. Anyways, I logged into personal time and stepped outside and called this guy. And I said, listen, can I, come and work for you guys? He goes, no, it's too busy. There's no one here, there's no jobs available. And I said, listen, okay, fair enough. I said, how about if I just take you out to lunch and I just ask you about the industry, He goes, oh man, I don't know. And I said, well, what about if I just send you my CV? And he goes, yeah, look, send me your CV. We'll see what happens. So I did. I sent him the CV, and 2 weeks later, I was working on I found another job. I was in some construction. I got a phone call from someone working on the film and said, listen, I might be able to give you some work here, just push in a room. And I was like, well, thank you very much, sir. My little pinky toe was in the door, and I just kicked that door down with all the passion that I could muster. As soon as I was in there, I was ravenously sweeping the floors and asking every single person every question, getting everyone's name, learning what was going on. And that was it. I was in the film industry from a crappy call center, from the most loathed job I could possibly imagine, and I got in. So...
That was literally the last call that you took at the call center?
It is literally, yes.
Like, wow.
Yep.
That's such an amazing story.
Yeah.
There's...
Like, I wasn't even supposed to be on that phone line. I usually only take domestic calls. It's just like the average person, but this was a corporate call. And the boss knew that I could handle it because of my sort of warm persona, because of the fact that I never did my job properly in terms of wrapping up the phone calls really fast. She goes, listen, you can just handle it. Take that call. They've been waiting for 6 minutes. And so like a knight in shining armor, I took that call. The guy was really nice. And I, dragged out the conversation. So, lovely day today. Where do you work? And he's like, oh, we're making a film. I go, that's interesting. What kind of a film is it? He goes, oh, it's the Marvel film. We're doing the Wolverine film. I go, okay, excellent. And then I was like, give me phone numbers and, everything. So yeah,
that's so amazing. And then I think the next thing that you did is, even though, or at least the way that you told the story, the guy's like, oh, I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe you could try calling this number. Yep. You didn't take that as like something that you just toss away, like, well, they're probably too busy. So, and this is probably a fake phone number. I mean, we tell ourselves all kinds of crazy things that hold us back.
Oh,
and you're just like, no, as soon as I go outside, I'm calling this guy.
Yeah.
This is it's like, this is a million times better and closer to what I want to do than being at the call center. And I'm not at the call center anymore. I just handed in my ID badge or whatever it is.
Yeah.
and then it all kind of just snowballed and worked out. And then your personality shone through once you got in there. And I thought it was really cool. I was laughing at one point. I just want to explain it. That when you were at film school, you realized that a lot of the stuff didn't interest you, and you failed because you did what did interest you, and you wanted to spend all this time. And the profs probably loved you, like the props guy, that wow, there's a student that actually cares. And because of my experience of art school was a lot of people, putting in time, you do your project and whatever, but you're not super engaged. those people who are super engaged, people love super engaged people.
Yeah,
There's
that's right.
there's no way to not love somebody that's really engaged. I have a cousin, and he operates a truck that
Yep.
like a delivery truck with this giant arm. So he like moved, if you moved into like the third floor of a building and you wanted your grand piano delivered, he would be the guy to deliver it.
Yes.
And you would think that, oh man, that's got to be the most boring job I've ever heard of. However, he has so much passion for doing this that I would just sit and listen. I love listening to him talk about this stuff because it's so exciting. His passion just bleeds through.
That's great.
And just like how you did when you got your pinky toe in the door, like you were saying, and then the rest is basically history. All you needed was that one shot, that one chance to get in,
Yeah.
and then everything else kind of just fell into place. And if you didn't know something, you just learned it along the way. So
Yeah, exactly right. And I think, and let's face it, another really appealing thing about enthusiastic people is, I mean, if you were an employer and that this guy's coming up to you and asking you questions, you know, like very motivated, very interesting questions, it's really cool. Like you're happy to share that information because um, I don't know. I've found that people are only too happy to share information if you ask and you're passionate about what it is you're asking, you know, like, so, I mean, obviously I didn't walk into that job where I was pushing a broom knowing how to make a prop, knowing how to mold anything or do anything. So I was around people who did. And because I love, I guess, movies so much, because I love the industry so much, in many ways I love them. And it showed, because every time I talk to them I go, wow, how cool are you, man? You could do this. Man, how did you even do that? Wow, that's such a cool trick. And they're like, well, let me show you. Yeah, wow, this is great. And, you know, it's a pretty symbiotic experience. I'm getting a lot out of it. They're getting a lot out of it. They feel validated. I mean, a lot of people have been sort of they've had some bad experiences maybe, and you know, you get some young guy in there who's genuinely enthusiastic and just really keen on your job. They get excited again. They're like, wow, it's really great to have, you know, this kind of blood around here. And you know, and it works in both of your favor, you know.
oh yeah, definitely. And personality is really so important. Personality, it's hard to get in the door sometimes with personality alone, but once you're in, that's
Yeah.
sort of like then you're on the rocket ship. You're meeting all the right people.
Yep.
People like having you around. If it came down to it, like I've been in cases where teams were downsized, and if I was the guy downsizing it and I had to choose, it's like, okay, there's one guy here, his
Yes.
skills aren't quite as good, but he's awesome to be around. Like the team is just so happy when he's here. And then there's this other guy, he's better, but he just gets his stuff done and then he goes home. He doesn't really talk to anybody. He just keeps to himself. It's like,
Yeah.
well, you know what? I just like having the fun guy around. I feel like the morale boost that we get from having this person here is worth it. So
Yeah.
I'm sorry, kind of like quiet guy who's a little bit better. You're gonna be the one to go. Happy guy, you know, we're keeping you around. We like what you're
Yeah.
doing, and we know that you're just gonna improve.
Yeah, I've definitely got by on some jobs where I felt like, wow, I'm really out of my depth here, and then there I was maintaining the job to the very end. So yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, we should wrap this episode up. We went on a little bit longer, but I think the story was awesome.
Cool.
I'm going to listen to it again. And Dane, where can people find you online? I know that you've got your own website and a production company website as well. So where can people find that?
Yeah, look, I think probably I'm most in touch with people via Facebook. A lot of people around the world have spoken to me on my Facebook page, which is my artist page. It's just Dane Hallet artist page. So if you just search that on Facebook, and I mean, I'm more than happy to talk to anyone. And I've also got my website, which is just www.danehallet.com. And then I've also got a production company I run with my partner and friend John Marsh, called Idea Garage, where we make short films as well. We make films and have heaps of projects on there. So that's Idea Garage, www.ideagarage.com.
I think is it .com.au? I'm just looking at it right now.
Of course, yeah. I mean,
right.
I'm not used to telling the world my email, my web addresses. Yeah, that's right. It is .com.au. I am in Australia.
Okay, perfect. And if you don't want to type that stuff in, we'll have show notes for this with links to Dane's spots where you can just click and then you won't have to worry about it. So that'll be at pencilkings.com/Dane Hallet. That'll be DANE-HALLETT. Thank you so much, Dane.
Thank you, Mitch.
I feel energized. I feel I'm trying to be a lot more emotionally aware when I'm doing these interviews of how I'm feeling. And right now I'm just like, man, I can take on the world. Nothing can stop me. It doesn't matter if I don't know. It doesn't matter if it's confusing or whatever. Just do it. And
that's great, man. I'm glad.
Yeah. So thanks so much, Dane. I really appreciate it. And yeah, all the best in the future. I know that you're gonna just be, a ray of sunshine wherever you go. So I think
thanks a lot.
I think yeah, it's been great to talk to you. So thanks a lot, Dane.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity. Talk to you later, man.
All right.
Bye.
Demands patience, skill, years of practice.
Ah, you talk like a fool. I would trade a century of practice for an ounce of inspiration.